And it was about 2 weeks ago, Fox News did a presidential poll. And the interesting part about the poll to me was not, who people said they were going to vote for. And these were all registered voters. They polled about 1,200 people. But what should have stood out to the media, and of course they ignored it, and The Economist, was one particular question that was buried down in the poll. It was question number 31. But it asked the voters, what is your main economic concern? What is the problem that is most affecting people like you? And you would think they would say unemployment, or you'd think they'd say the housing market, but that's not what they said. By an overwhelming margin, 41% of the voters identified inflation as their primary concern, rising prices in particular. That was more than twice as many people as the ones who identified taxes. Of course, inflation is a tax. It's just a different form of tax. But more Americans, twice as many Americans, are worried about the inflation tax as we're worried about all other taxes combined.
If you went out to Emeril's, as an example, or Nola, or Arnaud, or one of these fine restaurants, Commander's Palace, how many people would be delighted to find the goods on the menu at half price? Anybody? Thank you. I mean, you go to, Commander's Palace and have that wonderful plate of quail of theirs. Instead of it being $40, it's $19.95. That'd be a good thing, right? It'd be a bear market in quail. For some reason, when we buy quail, we want them to be cheap. And when we buy stocks, we want them to be expensive. Does that make any sense at all? How many people were here in 2010? Raise your hands. Do you remember how ebullient this place was at 2010? This hall, the speaker's hall, was so packed that if everybody would have exhaled simultaneously, it would have blown the door out. Everybody was excited. We were in a bull market. We were setting ourselves up for failure. And what I'm going to talk about today is simply the fact that bear markets are the time you make money. Bull markets are the time that you harvest that money.
Let me tell you a funny story that sums up what I think of government. There's a man in a hospital bed. He's dying. It's his last moments in life. His name is David. And sitting next to him is his loyal wife, Ida. She's been with him for 50 years. And David says to Ida, Ida, you were with me through all the most important and even painful moments in our life. I remember when I lost my job and I decided I was meant to be an entrepreneur. And then I started a business, and the business failed, but you stuck with me. And I was hit by a car, and I lost my leg, and you stuck with me. And the doctor told me I had cancer, and there you were, the only person by my side. And now I'm on my deathbed, and who's with me? You. And I've given this a lot of thought overnight, Ida, and you know what I've realized? You are a jinx. Get out of my hospital room. Get out of my hospital room. Get out of my life. That's how I feel about government, ladies and gentlemen. They're always right next to us when bad things are happening, and they're there to save us. But what they don't tell you is they're the ones that caused it.
2010 was the most ideological election since 1980, meaning it was about the big issues. It was about the size, the scope, the reach of government. The great debate set off by Obama's election and by the way he's pursued this ambitious left-wing agenda. And when you frame the argument in that way, Obamacare's intrusiveness, cap and trade trying to get control of energy, stimulus spending out of control, leaves not a trace, doesn't do a thing for the economy. You take on all of the ideological beliefs and tenets of liberals, you crush them in a real election. Why? Because every time the Gallup samples the electorate and asks them for their ideological affiliation, the answer is always the same. 20% liberal, 40% conservative, 36 or so percent moderate. The other 4% have no idea what the hell's going on. But you cannot govern a country successfully and hope ever to be re-elected running on the base of 20% of the population, which is what Obama did.
Every dollar that is sucked from productive society going into the maw of the state is a dollar that can't be used to create more wealth. It's used to fund welfare programs and warfare programs, and that's basically all where it goes, okay? And we shouldn't be talking about just what happens here in the United States, going into what you started to say, Gary, because relative to the rest of the world, this country has been going downhill for decades right now because of all these tax and regulation and inflation policies here. So this is all just dancing around. These are trivial points that these guys are talking about.
Don't you think Tea Party people want a lot less government, and they affected the 2010 election in the right direction anyway?
No, the Tea Party people don't have any principles, any central guiding principles that they're working on. They simply want to have less taxes and less governments. Of course, if somebody was poisoning me, I'd want less arsenic. I'd want less strychnine in my tea. But that's not going to solve the problem. No.
I must say that someone who makes a prediction about what's going to happen in 2 generations isn't exactly going out on a limb, since nobody here will be alive
I'm
to
just
judge
taking
you.
a trend and projecting it.
I'm going to try
It's
doing
very
that on
easy to
television.
project.
In 75 years, Brett, following is going to happen. I'm not sure that James and I should take this on. I think the bait is being swung in front of us. I haven't debated anarchism since high school, so I'm sort of out of practice. And even if theoretically it had some attraction, how do you have your first convention?
Exactly the point, Charles. You're quite correct.
Well, if I could quote my favorite economist, he said, in the long run, we're all dead. God, I don't know, it's got to happen in 75 years.
Yeah, but he wasn't an economist. He was a political apologist.
A political hack. All right, my
That's
favorite
right.
political hack.
Yeah.
Whatever.
An economist-
How the hell I know it's got to happen in 75
James,
years?
an economist is somebody that accurately describes the way the world works. He doesn't prescribe the way he thinks the way it ought to work.
You know what? You focused on 75 years from now. I'm focused on 10 days from now. That's...
Well,
It's said that the difference between a statesman and a politician is a statesman looks to the next generation, the politician the next election. Well, a political hack, we look forward to the next tracking pole.
The government tinkers with your life in every possible way. They try to put roadblocks up. People doing these conversions, they try to get in trouble. Instead of furthering what made the country great, unleash the animal spirits in this room. Okay? Don't burden our kids and our grandkids with a bunch of failed ideas, because the stimulus didn't have a lasting effect. Ben Bernanke's printing didn't have a lasting effect. You know what did have a lasting effect? The debt. Okay? The debt is like a Twinkie. You can bury it for 50 years and you dig it up, it's still debt.
And if I can say a word about the American dream, when the American founders got together in Philadelphia a couple hundred years ago, they believed that they had hit upon a formula for a new type of country. And the founders believed that if this formula were adopted, this new country would become the strongest, the most prosperous, and the most successful country on the planet, in the world. And this belief that America is unique, that America is based on a unique recipe, this is called American exceptionalism. By the way, it's worth asking for a moment, what is exceptional about America? To me, an immigrant from India, one thing that's exceptional about America, as I look out into the audience, I think, what if you came to India and lived there for the rest of your life? What if you worked there? What if you took Indian citizenship? Could you, in fact, become Indian? No. Why? Because to be Indian, you need 2 things: brown skin and Indian parents. Being Indian is a function of birth and blood. But in America, it's not the case. The Irish, the Italians, the Jews, and today the Koreans, the West Indians, you can come to America and it might take you a couple of generations, but you can, in fact, become American. America is a country not based on birth or blood, but really based upon embracing a certain way of life.
America's great recovery and renewal will happen when we regain the still spine and the moral courage of our grandparents' generation. And we'll see this most exceptional nation through its tough times by the grace of God. That way we'll ensure a better future for our children and their children. And we'll restore the Washington of our founders by strengthening our communities, empowering the individual, and downsizing D.C. That's how we'll get our debt under control. See, nothing is inevitable if we take our fate into our own hands and if we lead by the grace of God. And by leading, we will preserve this last, best hope of man on earth. That is America. So from the bottom of my heart, I thank you so much for being part of the solution. And I say, God bless this union with justice and all of you with confidence. And thank you so much for working so hard for this great country. God bless you.